Thanks for listening to the Drummers Weekly Groovecast. You can contact the show at twitter.com/DW Groovecast and through Facebook at facebook.com/Drummers Weekly Groovecast.
Good evening.
I am warning you right now, if you touch my drums, I will stab you in the neck with a knife.
Ain't a bucket. Ain't a bucket. Mom!
Take it easy. Lower it.
I'm not gonna lower it. I have to do this now.
I don't mind you playing it, but lower it.
Everything get straightened out?
No, we had a problem. I mean, we tried to do everything we could.
What do you mean?
Well, you know what I mean.
Next.
Little trouble there. You're rushing.
Yeah, well, you know, that's just like your opinion, man.
Yeah.
Welcome back to part 2 of our Best of 2017. Phil here from the Drummers Weekly Groovecast. Last week we gave you a part 1 of our Best of 2017, which was a little bit of a double dip, a double feature, almost 2 hours of the best of our interviews from 2017. And so we thought we'd continue on while we were still in the holiday season and before we power into 2018 with brand new content. Thought we'd bring you one more best of, and this week we decided we'd do the best of our segments. And our long-term listeners know that at the end of most of our topic shows, we take some time to do segments of what we consider to be our favorite underrated drummers, favorite underrated drum tracks, pieces of must-have gear that we recommend. And then also later in the year, we started doing something called the Drummers Weekly Groovecast Garage, where my podcast partner, John Chalden, calls upon his decades and decades of gear repair tricks and tips that he imparts upon our listening audience. So we're going to have a little bit of all those, all mishmashed together in this one Best of 2017 show. All right, let's get going. We'll see you on the other side. Folks, we haven't had an underrated drum track in a long time, or as John likes to say, this is our underrated drum track of the quarter. But I've got a good one for you today. And you could say that this one also falls under the underrated drummer as well. So I'm going to go with a Pittsburgh drummer named Roger Humphreys. And the track I'm going to go with is off of the Horace Silver Cape Verdean Blues album, and the track is Nutville. You know that one, John?
I don't.
Oh, that's a good
I should.
one. Let me tell you. Let me say this. I'm going to call a YouTube commenter out on all this because it's funny. I actually laughed. I have to say I have to laugh at this, but it's something I love to call this kind of folk out. I was listening to this wonderful track, and it's got a bunch of nobodies on there like Woody Shaw, Joe Henderson, J.J. Johnson, Bob Cranshaw.
Up-and-coming hacks.
Bunch of up-and-coming hacks, right? This is a track that was recorded back in 1965, and there's this just blistering version that I'm listening to, and someone under the YouTube comments put, "Yeah, man, Nutville, 1979 Spirit of Atlanta." Oh, I love it, man, when people say that like these definitive versions of songs are done by drum and bugle corps. Man, did you hear Chicago Symphony do Bartok Concerto for Orchestra? Yeah, man, but what about Blue Devils 1991? So anyway, I got off topic there a little bit, but I thought it was funny. Man, I laughed for 10 minutes when I saw that comment under there.
That's pretty good.
It is. Yeah, but Roger Humphreys is a Pittsburgh jazz drummer. Still lives up there, still performs to this day. And he played in one of Horace Silver's groups back in the mid-'60s. So back to this track, Nutville. It's a up-tempo Latin to swing number. And I guess you might call the Latin groove, it's kind of like a up-tempo mambo. And it just goes all throughout the song. It goes back and forth between Latin and swing, and he does a smoking nice solo at the end of the song. But that's my pick. It's Nutville. Roger Humphreys is the drummer, and it's off of the Horace Silver album, Cape Verdean Blues. You'll be able to find it. I'll put it up on our YouTube channel.
Awesome.
Yeah,
I
where
can't
you can
wait
hear
to
the track. It's a lengthy little track too. It's about 7.5 minutes long. It's got J.J. Johnson's playing bone on it as well. So there's like 3 horn solos, piano solo, and a drum solo. I don't think Crenshaw solos on bass.
Fellas had something to say.
They did, and they said it well. This guy Roger Humphreys also he's got a fair amount of chops he's playing on this thing as well. So for our chops loving folks, his solo has got some guts to it.
All right. Well, we'll look forward to hearing that. Phil's choices are always exhilarating and challenging, and
are you trying to cultivate our relationship?
I typically need a friend to call me and walk me off the ledge after listening to them, but nonetheless, a brilliant choice, I'm sure.
Thank you.
So, Phil's other choice of underrated drum tracks is going to be disguised as my choice. This fella has played on a hit or two, and love-hate relationship with the many, but track record proves he had something going on. The underrated track of this hit master name, you might know this guy, Ringo Starr.
Never heard of him.
He was a session guy.
He
ghost drum for a lot of guys.
Did he play with Robert Plant?
And never told anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually played with Robert Goulet.
All right.
There you go. I brought us full circle.
All right.
This track is brilliantly understated, and many of us would have gone to some standard cross-stick nonsense presented to us, but the Beatles in My Life is, I think I love it more and more as time goes on.
It's hard to play, man.
It's hard to play. And, going into that B section, you got to kind of tang the hump, if you will.
Yeah.
Which is kind of unnatural for me. Like that whole tip on the bell thing,
Yep.
but I do it out of respect. And it's one of those grooves where you got to have everybody around you trusting and locked in and doing their part too. Because it's an open groove and that there's not this constant subdivision. And I think that's what makes it more difficult than anything. I mean, sometimes you're brain dead. You're like, oh wait, whoa, it's an and with 3 hi-hat.
I was going to ask you something about that. When you I have to play that tune fairly regularly.
Yeah, we do too.
Do you ever like ghost drum some 8ths on your leg or anything before you hit that little stab before the snare drum?
I do that all the time
All
with
right.
like a ton of different grooves where there's no continuous 8th note or I do that all the time. And it's just natural. We are always thinking subdivision when we're playing. Well, why not play subdivision while we're doing something, even if it's not to be heard? So yeah, I do that. Sometimes I approach that tune a little more heavy-handed in that big stage, whatever, if it is, loud environment. I might alter that a little bit and play a slightly different version of that groove. But I assure you, out of respect to all that is the Beatles and Ringo, I can play that song as is.
Totally
there's-
underrated track, man.
Yeah, man. It's
Difficult to play.
It's so great too, and it's creative, and not in any pretentious way either. My underrated drummer is a fella named Pete Thomas. Kind of came into his own with Elvis Costello and the Attractions. And I mean, it's just, those tracks are just dead perfect pop rock, you know, a little bit of punk and, you know, some of that in there, but just, I mean, just like magic drum tracks. He just has that thing, man. It just, anything he plays makes sense. It serves the song. The feel is right. The sounds are right. The vibe is right. The attitude's right. And he has parlayed that into a significant studio career.
Mm-hmm.
You know, besides Elvis, there's, you know, he's done some awesome Los Lobos stuff, which a lot of people don't know.
I did not know that, sir.
Yeah, they use some studio guys on a number of tunes, and rightfully so. I think, you know, Keltner might have played on some of that stuff, but Pete Thomas has done some, and they're the ones that I'm aware of are really, really fantastic. He played on some of the seminal Graham Parker stuff that a lot of people are religious about. Sheryl Crow, Neil Finn, Lucinda Williams, he did some stuff. A lot of people don't know he's done some of that. Just iconic, great rock and roll stuff that appeals to not only the average listener, but musicians, and rightfully so, because this guy's got the magic when it comes to his thing, and he does it, and it's fantastic. And man, I've seen him live a few times, and it just delivers. It's not any trickery going on here.
Man, this guy, as I'm going back through my Rolodex of Elvis Costello and Attractions tunes, he literally codifies about 5 different styles at one time. In other words, of course, all those English folk, man, were into American rock and R&B. Mm-hmm. There's that. He's got that in there in spades. Yeah. He's got this slick English pop thing happening. He's got the punk thing happening.
Yeah, it can be loose and kind of raw.
And then also, man, punk bridges into kind of that British new wave thing.
True.
As well. And then, man, what's the stinking tune, the Detectives, where he's playing the reggae group?
Yeah, it's definitely got some influence there with the reggae thing.
You know? So, and you know, it's not like Carlton Barrett, you know, reggae, but I mean, it's got that certain kind of aggressive, you know, punkish vibe reggae thing happening. It's very cool.
Just, yeah, man, check this guy out. I mean, there's endless tunes he's played on that I promise you, you know, in listening to him, he'll really turn you on and become an influence in that respect, you know, that approach. It's really underrated cat.
Good deal, man. Pete Thomas.
Mm-hmm.
My guy comes just a tad bit later, a few years later than Pete Thomas in the realm of actually making a splash, getting a little bit famous.
Right.
And he is another one of our guys that is a direct descendant. He is a baby of John Bonham. And the guy in question is the wonderful Bobby Chouinard.
Mm-hmm.
BC, as all of the kids call him. Yeah. I'll tell you, I'm going to tell you my story in a few minutes. Or Grandpa, right, yeah. Bobby Chouinard, Boston drummer, came to fame in we'll call it probably right around the turn of 1980 or so with Billy Squier. And that's where I became familiar with him, man. That Billy Squier was one of the first concerts I ever saw, probably back in the early 80s, man. I can remember maybe 82 or so.
And MTV was really blowing him up, so
and killed him as well, which I'm going to get to in just a minute. Yeah. Bobby Chouinard is highly, highly influenced by John Bonham to the point to where he was kind of a big guy. He even looked a little bit like Bonham in some ways. Played a big old Ludwig drum set, huge. I don't know if it was a 26 bass drum, but it was a big old bass drum. Huge, big Paiste cymbals as well, and just played thunderous caveman style grooves on top of that. And it's funny, man. I think this is at least the second, if not the third Bonham baby that we kind of talked about. If you remember last year, man, we talked about when Leonard Hayes from Y&T died, and he was a Bonham baby.
Yep.
As well.
There's good reason to talk about those guys.
I'm telling you,
that's some great influence.
Yeah, some
if
wonderful.
They're coming
influence.
close. We should talk about.
Yeah, and if you're familiar with Squire's music, there are, I think, virtually everything that he released, everything that Squire released, I think Bobby Chouinard played on it. The highlights for me, there's a track called "Lonely As the Night," which was a hit. I don't think it was a huge hit, but it was a hit.
Got some play for sure.
Yeah, and man, let me tell you, if you come in on just the instrumental parts of it, it actually sounds like Zeppelin. There are parts inside of that song in particular where there's little breaks, little drum breaks that he does very Bonham-like fills, and then just overall the vibe of that tune, it sounds like Zeppelin. Several of the early Squire tunes, man, sound a lot like Zeppelin.
Clearly an influence.
Yeah. Also, I like In the Dark. That's another one that he sounds great on. If you want just ridiculous meat and potatoes, one of the big Billy Squire hits was The Stroke. I mean, just huge, thunderous drum sound on that.
That was a gigantic hit for sure.
Huge hit. And then the hit of all hits, it was actually Billy Squire's biggest hit. And then the double-edged sword, it was the one that killed his career, was a tune called Rock Me Tonight. And all you need to do to see why it killed his career is go to YouTube and watch the video.
Painful.
Yeah, there's quite a story behind that. I won't get into it at this time, but MTV not only helped make Billy Squire, but it actually killed his career also. His career officially went off a cliff, man, after that video.
It's horrible.
Pretty much. And you can see Bobby Chouinard on a whole variety of videos, but he is in the entire last half of that Rock Me Tonight video after Billy Squire leaves his pastel-colored bedroom, ripping his shirt off and frolicking around.
He doesn't leave, he prances
he skips out of there. Yeah.
That's brutal to think about.
Aside from Billy Squire, Bobby also played on Ted Nugent, and then I just discovered, and somebody's going to have to prove this to me, it says that he played on a Cher record.
Wow.
Now,
I mean, she's been a chameleon, and
yeah,
if she did a heavier record, I could see that.
Any listeners that know what track or tracks BC played on, send us a quick email. I'd love to hear it, to hear how Bobby played on a Cher record.
If you could send a track without the vocals, that would be awesome.
Hater. You afraid she's playing percussion into a microphone?
It's very possible.
John, I'm not going to end this podcast till I tell you and all the folks out there about my meeting with Bobby Chouinard back on November the 2nd of 1984.
You remember the date?
Well, it was my birthday.
Oh, that helps. Yeah.
But yeah, I absolutely I remember. This was a very vivid memory. It's kind of a short story, and it will tell you everything you need to know about Bobby Chouinard.
All right.
Well, on November the 2nd, 1984, my friend, it was publicized that Bobby Chouinard, drummer from the Billy Squire Band, was going to make a public appearance, a meet and greet at Hughley's Music Store in Knoxville, Tennessee, over on Kingston Pike. I can even tell you the location where it was, because there were a couple of different Hughley's Music. Well, Billy Squire was having their gig that night at the Knoxville Civic Coliseum, but a mere hour and a half to the northeast of Knoxville, in the college town of Johnson City, Tennessee, playing at Freedom Hall, there was a little old Canadian band that's already mentioned in this podcast. Rush was playing. So my 15-year-old self at that time, it was an easy choice, man. I had seen Billy Squier before. I had to go see Rush. They were on I believe at that time it would have probably been the Grace Under Pressure tour. Unfortunately for me, that was the first time I'd ever seen him, and that was when they were starting their keyboard phase of their career. Still a good show.
They didn't have
percussionist?
Cranky old loudmouth drummer with a kick and a snare on that gig, did they?
No, but I understand the next tour there will be. So anyway, back to the story. I decided that before I made the trek an hour and a half to the northeast to go see Rush, that I was going to go see Bobby Chenard at Hughley's Music and tell him what a fan I was of his, because I was indeed a fan of Bobby Chenard. Still am a fan of Bobby Chenard. So he was supposed to be there roughly around 2 o'clock that afternoon. And sure enough, here comes Bobby walking into the store with we'll call him a handler. Probably might have been a tech or like a, road manager kind of a guy or whatever. So Bobby comes strolling in, and there's a grand total of 0 people there to see him, except for me. We'll say 1. So I was there.
Half.
Yeah, there was a half.
You've grown into a whole.
I have.
But then I've heard stories about you. You were half.
So Bobby is just literally standing aimlessly in the middle of the store, not over by the drums. There's no table set up for this guy, nothing. He's just standing over there with his hands in his pockets. Right?
Sad.
So, you know me, I'm going to go over and I'm going to talk to the man.
Yes.
So I walk over to him and I stick my hand out, my 15-year-old hand, and I'm like, Mr. Chenard? And he sticks his hand and he goes, BC. And I said, oh, BC, man, I'm Phil. Man, I really dig your playing, man. I saw you play last year on I guess it'd been the Emotions in Motions tour down in Chattanooga at the Roundhouse. I said, man, I really dug the show. And he was like, oh, thanks, man. Thanks for coming out. I appreciate it. And then we talked a little bit about, just playing with Billy Squier and his drums and, what he had done coming up, studying. And at that time, he told me, man, one of his huge influences aside from Bonham was Don Brewer from Grand Funk Railroad, who is a huge influence on me too. Smoking good player, man.
No doubt.
Don Brewer. But anyway, so we were talking a little bit about it, and so I thought I would lob a little something out there to him. The opening band on that tour that I saw him play in Chattanooga was another Canadian band, prog rock band called Saga.
Oh, I remember them.
Remember they had a little song called Tonight We're on the Loose?
Yep.
Well, they had a left-handed drummer, a guy named Steve Negus, that was playing drums with him at that time. And he had a monster, big, huge kit, double bass kit, 6-inch tom all the way down to probably 18 inches, that whole thing. So
those wacky Canadians.
Yeah. So I went ahead and got brave, and I was like, yeah, man, that tour, you guys had an opening band out of Canada. And he goes, yeah, Saga. And I'm like, yeah. I said, I was kind of digging on their stuff too. I said, what'd you think about their drummer, Steve Negus? And he kind of looked off to the side a little bit, like, just check to see if anybody was listening. And he looked down at me and he goes, guy's a real light hitter. The little piece of gear that I want to talk about is something that I actually recently acquired, John, and I actually know that you are a fan of it as well.
I am.
This piece of gear has been around for a little while, but I was a late adopter to it, and it was the kind of thing where you would hear about this name and you would even see the occasional video on social media where people were raving about it. And so it finally, I guess it hit the saturation point on me where I was like, I guess I'd better check this out. And what it is it's a practice pad made by a company called ProLogix. And the model of the practice pad is the ProLogix 13-inch Red Storm practice pad. And brother, I am sold. And pretty much everybody that I've let play this practice pad, they have the same reaction. They look at it and they go, looks just like a gum rubber practice pad. I'm sure it's exactly like the other 14 gum rubber practice pads out there. They pick up the sticks and then they play and they hit the first half dozen notes and they look up at you with that smile and they were like, this is not the same gum rubber practice pad. And essentially what it is it is a gum rubber practice pad, but it significantly has less rebound than the traditional, we'll just say like real feel practice pad. It's a quiet practice pad. It has got, like I said, significantly more realistic feel. It has a hoop around it as well. And it will also fit inside the hoop of a traditional 14-inch snare drum. And I think, getting back to the construction of it, the magic is that it's actually got dual layers of playing surface of gum rubber. And essentially what it is you've got a traditional, probably like a 3/8-inch red gum rubber on top that you play. And underneath it, it looks like there's some kind of open cell, softer foam, or softer rubber, I should say, really, that's underneath it, that cushions it. It gives you a much more realistic feel. It's very quiet. And it's just awesome, man. I mean, it takes a lot for me to get excited about a practice pad because I've got about 10 of them. But this one is hands down the best one that I've got. It combines the realistic playing feel of, say, like one of the old school Remo practice pads. It has a drum head on it.
Yep.
But it's about 75% quieter. And then another cool thing about it is it's, again, super easy to transport. I've actually taken it out with me to gigs and on the road a little bit, where what I will do is I will take the actual practice pad and just put it on the batter head of my snare drum and put that whole thing into a hard case. And it travels perfectly, man. So That's my pick. Check it out. It's the ProLogix Red Storm practice pad. And again, the size that I got is the large one. It's the 13-inch practice pad. It's a little bit pricey, but you will know where the money went.
Hey, that pad is so cool that I've almost done something to be confused with practicing on it when I've been over here. You've seen me practice more here than I have in the last 30 years. Those 84 seconds that I played that pad speak volumes to how awesome it is.
It's really good, man. I mean, that in itself, I'm telling the ProLogix folks, get in touch with us right now. Put John in your next print ad campaign. You will sell a zillion of these things.
Man, it's a pretty good idea.
It's an excellent idea, man. I'm telling you, because I mean, they make you want to practice.
The laziest drummer in the world is practicing. It's
quietly,
incredible. Quietly, most importantly, especially when you start hearing my devils, I assure you want them quiet. Are those single trip, what?
Buzz, what?
Huh? Oh, I'm glad that thing's quiet.
That's why they call it a practice pad, right?
Right.
No judgments.
Oh, something that I use that I can't do without is Zildjian stick wax. And it started in some of these brutally hot 2-hour outdoor gigs that we do around Atlanta that are popular in our circles. You know, it's so insanely hot, and if you're sweating and over gripping and blistering up, don't even talk to me about technique, because under these conditions, technique had nothing to do with nothing.
That practice pad's gonna help you out.
No,
bro.
You're just trying to hang on to a stick that you're sweating like to no end, and it did tear up your hands, and I'm not a glove guy. I'm not going to wear gloves. So somebody just off the cuff recommended, hey, you try that stick wax. And I did, and I used it. The first time I used it on was a 4th of July long set, 98 degrees and then some, just brutal. And I came away unscathed, and I was like, oh, this is great. So I'm like, I'm going to keep that in my stick bag or wherever just to make sure I have it for a hot gig. I played that not long after that, indoor, whatever, comfortable. And I didn't have them on the sticks, and I was like, I don't like this, I immediately, it was like some kind of psychological thing about like, man, I'm not thinking about, it being slippery or whatever. And so I realized too, in the winter, I'm jumping all over the place, but in the winter when your hands dry out and kind of slick, I just put a little bit on, and I'm to the point now where psychologically, I have to have it on there or I'm bumming. And the only time I don't is I'm doing more of a low volume, straight ahead kind of thing. I don't like it on there because I do a lot more finger stuff. And so that stick wax, man, if you're struggling with, the makeup of your skin or, whether your skin's dry or whatever, like it just kind of has become the great equalizer. And I use it on almost every gig that, outside of some finger control stuff.
Couple questions for you. Is that stuff, it's in a little jar or a can or
it's
something?
It's in a can.
Little can. Is it beeswax? Is that what it is? Or
I don't know. It's blue. That stuff I get. Blue.
Yeah. Do you put it right on your hands or right on the sticks?
No, I put it on a stick. And man, you don't want to put too much on because it really can be a hindrance at that point. I just lightly, right about the grip, just not much. Go easy at first if you're going to try it.
Yeah.
Just use a little bit, but not on your hands. I do it on the stick.
I got a good marketing tagline for them.
What's that?
Little dabble do ya.
Yeah,
like
that's
that
true.
One? It's original.
You can get sued.
So we're going to finish off today. We're going to do our little segment of a great underappreciated drum track. And we feel like we got a couple good ones for you today. And we're going to break some new ground this week, John. We're going to do our first country drum track.
Some might say our first two.
You know what? Good point.
Yeah.
I'm going to go first with mine today. The first track, or my track that I'm going to go with today, is one that I recently reheard, I guess it was a few weeks ago, and was just blown away at how good it feels. And it's a feel that, quite honestly, we almost never hear these days. And that's a shuffle. And it's a western swing, country swing, western swing, and it's from Dwight Yoakam's first album, Guitars and Cadillacs, etc., etc., etc. And it's the title track, Guitars and Cadillacs, and it is the drummer Jeff Donovan who's playing on it. It is just a brilliantly funky, loopy, lopey shuffle all the way fast. It's a faster shuffle also. And it's straight out of that Buck Owens Western swing feel. And there's something about the way that he plays this groove. He plays it in between cymbal and hi-hats, doing a lot of the double-handed shuffle type thing, that Western Texas, California kind of Bakersfield style shuffle. And man, it has just got a great little lope to it. And he also plays what I call perfectly timed, tasteful fills. Because when we think of that kind of up-tempo shuffle like that, a lot of times we think in terms of just doing like a lot of triplets, but he'll do those open triplets where the middle beat out of the triplet is missing. And virtually everybody, myself included, when we end up playing that, we want to rush those things, you know? And he just perfectly, tastefully plays those fills throughout the song, and he's got just great ensemble kicks that he hits throughout the entire song. So if you haven't heard that song, or if you haven't heard it in a long time, go back and revisit Guitars and Cadillacs. Dwight Yoakam from his first record back in I think it's the mid 80s, like 86, 85, 86.
It's deceivingly, that his career is longer than we kind of maybe think. 86 sounds right.
Yeah, and if you don't think that's a tough groove to play and hold and make it feel right, just sit down and play with it. Record yourself playing that feel for 3.5 minutes and see if you can make it feel like this guy. Brilliant.
Good stuff, man. I remember that record was kind of, I sort of opened my ears to a little more modern country because it was steeped in tradition for sure and roots and all that, which Dwight is. But
plus, he played Doyle Hargraves in Sling Blade.
Incredible. For a non-actor, you got to figure he pulled from experience on that one, because you don't pull out that performance just cold, like, okay, be an English professor from Oxford now, go, No, I think he knew that guy.
My response to that, John, is a man without vices is an untrustworthy man.
That might be true. Anyway.
Do your pick.
I mentioned there might be 2 country choices today, but arguably not country in the traditional sense. But my track today comes from a Lyle Lovett record called Joshua Judges Ruth, and it's the first song on the record called Church by the fabulous and well-documented Russ Kunkel. This track it's kind of this funky little shuffly tune, groove that it's got a little of New Orleans-y underpinnings, and I remember the recording, the drums are real dry, so you hear every little subtlety and all that, but it's just got this lopey, funky, kind of swampy thing about it, and then you put it on top of Lyle's, or underneath Lyle's wit and, just well thought out thing. It's a magic track in that sense. That whole record's got some of that, but this one in particular, I really encourage you to check it out if you haven't heard it. Russ just kind of showing some depth and experience and seasoning in his approach to this particular groove, man. It's really cool. And he's one of those guys, man. You hear all the stuff he's done, you go back and you realize how perfect it is for the songs, the James Taylor stuff, and it's like, whoa.
I remember as a kid seeing Russ Kunkel play behind Linda Ronstadt.
Mm-hmm.
That was a popular genre when I was a youngster. And aside from what you were talking about, and everybody knowing Russ as he's one of the great West Coast studio guys, man.
Song drummer.
Yeah, plays for the song. There's 2 things, man, that I also think of when I think of Russ Kunkel. I think of Brushes Like Sticks.
Yep.
With the James Taylor stuff.
Fire and Rain.
And I think of Rocky Horror Hairdo.
Dang, sorry, dude. Man, I thought we were framing you in all the respectful light.
Hey, we do it in good fun.
My track is from my hero, Jeffrey Porcaro.
Had a birthday.
He did very recently. A bittersweet day for all of us that know and love him and his contributions. The song that that came to mind is a song called Calling Elvis. It's a Dire Straits tune off a record called On Every Street, the opening track, and it's this fabulous and silky smooth tom groove that he plays, and it showcases More Than Likely, that great Gretsch sound. I'm almost positive that it is.
Mm-hmm.
Harkening back to our show and our love of that wonderful drum company. But it's just, man, it's just this cool, creative, and just nice loping, constant tom, jungly tom groove that he does, and it's just executed perfectly. And then, of course, Knopfler and all his brilliance, lays right on top of it, and it's a pretty magic moment. That record is such an underrated record too. Some really great songs. The drum chair is shared by Jeff and Manu Katché, which is really awesome.
It's really ironic too.
Yeah, it is. And some people don't know that Vince Gill is all over that record. He plays a lot of guitar and a lot of solos, does some harmony, I think. And at one point, Knopfler asked him to join Dire Straits, and Vince was sort of like, that'd be a lot of fun, but my career's going pretty good.
Was part of that record cut in Nashville?
That's a good question. I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah.
I kind of think it was L.A., but it wouldn't surprise me if they did some in Nashville. Incredible record, incredible writing, needless to say, amazing drumming. But Calling Elvis it's a fun tune, and I really recommend you check it out.
Well, my little quip about irony has to do with the other drummer that you mentioned that's on that record, who is actually my drum track pick of the week, and that is the French dynamo Manu Katché.
Fashion forward. He's a smooth cat on a lot of levels.
That he is. He's the purveyor of the Ludwig Black Beauty with a marching die-cast hoop on the top. Mm-hmm. One of those things. So my track that Manu Katché plays on is probably also roughly from the same era, roughly the same time. It's Robbie Robertson's debut album from 1987, and the track is called Somewhere Down the Crazy River. And this is one of those, I'm going to say it's got Manu Katché groove written all over it. It's one of these very syncopated, kind of angular sounding grooves that uses a combination of like
splash cymbals.
Well, it's got little roughs, little drags on the cymbals and the hi-hats, little 5-stroke rolls with these syncopated grooves that, he plays this track, I'm pretty sure, with the snares off all the way through it, and he's playing this little groove where the snare hits on like the of 1, toms that come in on like the of 3, and then sometimes on 4. I think it's a 4-bar pattern is what is primarily played on those verses, and then when it gets to the choruses, it goes into more of a straight 2 and 4 style groove. But it fits perfectly on this song because the verses have this kind of an ethereal, almost a spoken word sort of vibe that Robbie Robertson is singing or speaking, and then Manu's playing that kind of off-kilter syncopated groove, and it just feels so good, sounds so good all the way through, and it is one of the ultimate Manu Katché signature groove stamps that he put all over that song.
Love it. That guy is a distinct voice for sure, man. I'm confident almost across the board when I hear him. I know who it is.
Yeah,
he's just got that thing.
Is it somewhat surprising that he is not more well known and played on even more stuff than he did? Because really, we only think about him in about 3 or 4 different ways. We think about him with Peter Gabriel, think about him with Sting, think about him with Robbie Robertson. It is perplexing
that he's not, because it's not like he's bringing something that's just, distracting musically, and everything he does is incredibly musical, some of it becomes hooks
Yeah.
almost, you know. It is pretty fast. I don't know, you know, is he hard to work with? Is he not interested in doing a lot of projects? It's hard to say, man. You know?
Yeah, and I think the other couple things that might point us in the direction of why he doesn't is he lives in France and has always lived over there, to my understanding. I don't think he's ever had any interest in relocating.
That would be a big plus.
And also, if you've ever heard him speak before or met him before, he is not the easiest guy to understand. There's a language barrier. So I think those two things probably play a fairly big role in that.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What a great player, man. I have a hardware bag that I love, and I just really am not interested in having any other hardware bags.
I feel like after you told me about it, then I'm about to love it too.
I hope you will. I have, for a number of years now, had a protection racket rolling hardware case, and they've improved on it since the first one I owned. The one I own now, just the design of it makes a lot of sense, and I love it. It's the material in itself is really good. Great heavy duty Cordura. The zippers are, you know, high quality, but they also have the end with the wheels. They use really nice skateboard wheels, and the casing around said wheels is really well made. It's not this cheap, flimsy plastic that a lot of cases have.
Ooh, quick shout out to Adam Deitch there.
Yeah.
Skateboard wheels.
Okay. I'm sure he would approve of these wheels.
Yeah.
And there's a couple little other things too. Like the top is that coffin style top. It opens up completely. The zipper is the entire circumference almost, in that you don't have that zipper down the middle where you're stressing the case and everything. It's also easier to really, I lay my things in a certain way so I can get everything I want in, comfortably. There's a space for everything. So you're able to see that and do that, and you're not kind of, pushing it off in the dark corner there. It's all laid out for you to do.
John, is there any rigidity in those sides or top at all to be able to hold its shape?
Enough. Yeah, it's not like there's probably not sheets of plastic holding it up, but there's definitely they're not collapsing by any means. There's enough of that. I think the quality of the Cordura and probably the walls being probably more than just one. There's probably like and so, and on top of that, the other thing that's nice is the handles are well thought out, really well attached, and they're on each end. Plus, there's a two arch-like handles that come together. All that, but so you have your options in how you're handling the case as well. Which that's one thing I like about that company too. They always have more than one option of how you actually pick up a case.
Nice.
So that's it, man. It's just a preference. I've fallen into that case, and I like it for a lot of reasons, and relatively affordable.
I'm due for one, man.
Average
I'm seriously,
prices.
I'm about to check it out.
I get the shortest one. Some people are hung up about, I don't like tearing down my hardware. I kind of have this Zen thing about tearing down my hardware after a gig, I guess. It's sort of like, and putting it in the case, and it kind of just, it's sort of like the end of the evening. It's sort of my, so maybe,
they have
retentive thing.
They have
too.
several different links. Then is what you're saying.
28, 36, and 48, maybe something.
48, man. That'll take just about anything.
I'm not packing in.
For me, I wouldn't even have to I wouldn't even have to like countersink my cymbals. Wouldn't have to telescope them.
Nah,
just put the stand straight in.
But that case fits in the car that I have perfectly with my thing. But again, I'm not hung up about tearing my stuff down. And in a lot of ways, I think if you are breaking down your hardware, a lot of ways there's less potential for problems too.
Yeah.
Things aren't bending. Things aren't, they just kind of lay together better. And
nice.
I don't know, man. That's what I like. I like that case. Check it out.
Right on. My pick this week is from Regal Tip. It is a relatively new brush. I guess it's been out maybe a couple years, year and a half, 2 years. And it is the Regal Tip Jason Sutter brush. Now, those of you who are not aware of this, they're probably saying one of two things. One, who's Jason Sutter? Or two, that's the guy that plays with Marilyn Manson. Why does he have brushes? Well, he's a pretty good player, man, outside of that. He's a pretty versatile guy.
Schooled.
Yeah, well-schooled guy.
Yeah. He's been around.
And you're probably going, well, now that I know that, then what makes his brushes so wonderful?
Yeah, what?
I'm going to tell you. Thanks for asking. For those of you folks who know, and I'm sure all of y'all know about the world-renowned industry standard brush, it's the Regal Tip 583R, right? Everybody owns 583R. Well, there was another brush that was put out maybe 10 years ago that was a direct response to folks who wanted a stiffer, more stick-like playable brush, and that was the Jeff Hamilton brush that was put out.
Which miraculously he plays in every context.
Brilliantly, too.
It's unbelievable.
Well, I'll say a quick thing or two about that. The Hamilton brush has got a rather large, oversized rubber handle. It's still a telescopic brush with a push rod in it, and it's still, of course, metal strands. But the metal wires that are on this brush are incredibly thick. They're really super thick, and there's less of them per brush. But you have to keep in mind that if you watch Jeff play, his brush strokes are very, very lateral to the drum head.
Yeah, that's true.
It's not nearly as much straight up and down.
Way less.
Yes.
Bending of.
Significantly less. Yeah, because the way he holds those brushes, when you see him do his sweeps and swishes, his hands, the majority of the brush is just laying on the head anyway. He doesn't have to push that brush down to actually make contact. So you just have to take my word for it, or go to YouTube and see him playing some brushes, and it'll be a lot clearer.
You should go see him play brushes no matter what.
Yeah, he does not suck.
Woo.
That's for sure. Now, in the roundabout way, getting back to the Sutter brushes, the Sutter brushes are directly in between the flexibility and the amount of snare wires between the 583R brush and the Hamilton brush. It is, dare I say, the perfect brush. And, I especially in the past, John, have played a lot of brushes, whole bunch of brushes, and I still play brushes a moderate amount these days. I couldn't believe it when I got these brushes, how good they feel and how good they sound. They are wonderful, wonderful brush. I encourage anyone who has to play brushes to grab them. It's the same diameter handle, I'm pretty sure, as the 583R, but it's got slightly stiffer brush wires. So check it out. They sound great when you're doing traditional, like jazz style patterns, where you're doing a combination of sweeps and swishes and pops and slaps and thups. And they also sound equally good if you want to use them in like a stick-like manner when you're playing groove style things. It speaks very well that way as well. So That's my pick for the week, the Jason Sutter Regal Tip brushes.
I'll go first. Mine, I listened to some music recently I haven't listened to in a while due to the death of Chris Cornell. Pulled up some Soundgarden and some Temple of the Dog and solo stuff, and enjoyed reliving some of that. And a track that I forgot how good it feels and how downright cool it is a track on Temple of the Dog that Matt Cameron plays drums on called Wooden Jesus. 6/8 thing that's got a little displaced snare thing through most of it. And it just feels like $1 million, and it just shows a side of him that's a little more buttoned down, a little more not slicker, but tighter, and he's always tight too. I'm always going to put my thing there, but it's just a really great feeling track from what some people just completely view as a rock drummer, but there's some depth in his playing. And this is a track that I think it has nothing to do with chops really, but just seasoned, mature playing. Wooden Jesus on Temple of the Dog. There's a million other great tracks. Well, there's probably 12 other great tracks on that record, but that one is just struck me as one I forgot how nice it was.
It starts out with the drum intro.
Quite a long one.
Yeah.
It feels so good. They're just like, we're going to come in 8 bars later than we planned.
Love it, man.
It's really great, though. Check that track out. Check that record out for that, Matt.
You got
Check Matt out for that.
You got Matt Cameron in there as well as a tribute to Chris Cornell. Well done.
All right.
My track for the week is a track by the wonderful Bill Stewart. Now, for most folks who are into jazz, you're going to immediately know who he is.
We hope.
Yeah, for those of you who are not, you need to know who Bill Stewart is. He's going to go down, if not already, is recognized as one of the great jazz drummers in history. He really is. And I think he's about 51 years old right now, and he's been doing it for the better part of 30 years. So he's been doing it since he was really in college at William Patterson. So on with the track.
30 more.
Yeah. The track is called 7.5, and it's from his own album, his solo album called Snide Remarks from about 1995. It's a Blue Note record. I am virtually certain that it is out of print, but through the miracle of technology, you can find this track on YouTube, and probably even if you just do a quick search, you can find it through several other different online carriers, probably like, Spotify and any of these other different music playing online providers. So want to talk just briefly about this track. Bill wrote it as he wrote everything else and arranged everything else on the record, Snide Remarks. It's a 16-bar song, and the reason it's called 7.5 is it's in 2 8-bar phrases where the 8th bar is a bar of 2/4. Hence, that's the half a bar or the 0.5. So it's 7 full measures, and then 7 full measures of 4, and then the 8th bar is a bar of 2/4. And it feels great, and it's not one of those kind of things where all of a sudden it feels like it's this abrupt shift in time signatures. It's just, it feels good, and the whole band makes it feel great. And it's kind of a unique form and arrangement, whereas they don't just take individual solos with mini chorus after chorus after chorus. It's a consistent trading of 8s, I think it is, all the way through. That's what it is. So it starts off from the beginning where the trumpet player is Eddie Henderson. Joe Lovano plays tenor saxophone.
Yummy.
Yeah. You got Bill Carruthers playing piano. Larry Grenadiers playing bass. And essentially, Eddie Henderson, Joe Lovano, Bill Carruthers, and Bill Stewart are all trading 8-bar phrases throughout the entire piece, throughout the entire tune. And you get to hear just these vintage and just these incredible characteristic Bill Stewart-isms all the way through. Everything from just how he really does have a signature sound. Mm-hmm. The way his drums are tuned, great Gretsch sound, those incredible sounding old Ks that he has, and then just his vocabulary on drums. It's all there in this one nice, neat little package. So I'm going to say 7.5 by Bill Stewart from the Snide Remarks album. talking about the little brother, Vinny Appice. This guy was in my wheelhouse of formative drummers when I was a young buck back in the mid-'80s. Vinny Appice, let me go ahead and say this. Vinny Appice is the brother of the one that everybody's thinking of, Carmine Appice, as he likes to say it, but I think everybody knows it. It's Appice. So
A piece of what?
Piece of drumming history.
That's true.
Yeah. But Vinny Appice is the younger brother, and I came to appreciate his playing through the band Dio. Named after the aforementioned and the late, great Ronnie James Dio. Now, Vinny actually got to know Ronnie through their association with Black Sabbath just prior to that. So Vinny and Ronnie were a part of Black Sabbath. This was after the days, of course, of Ozzy Osbourne and after the days of Bill Ward when he left the band. The only two original...
Kind of version 2.0.
Version 2.0. This was late 70s, early 80s with those albums like Mob Rules. Was I think the first studio album that Vinny and Ronnie were on, and then I think they did a live album, and kind of quite unceremoniously, Ronnie James Dio mutually parted ways in the middle of a tour, or in the middle of the mixing of that live record, I think is what it is. And he took Vinny with him, and they started the band Dio, and that's really where I picked up on this guy. And Vinny is just, man, he is a great East Coast pocket. Got a real heavy groove. Just got a real heavy, good feeling groove. He's got a signature sound also that's different from a lot of those guys, man, that we think of in those hard rock metal days of the 80s. He used a big kit, but one bass drum, single bass drum, all concert toms, John. All concert toms. I believe he was big in the Ludwig kind of octoplus, but just single bass drum. He had a lot of small to big drums, all concert toms, big mounted drums up off the side. Played the crap out of him, man. This guy, he has really good technique, especially good single strokes, man. Really good, solid, good feeling single strokes, and he is the unabashed master of doing these big single stroke fills around the toms and using little 3 and 4 stroke roughs, those kind of things all the way through the drum fills. Just a great feeling player, plays wonderful musical sounding fills. When you get to know his style, it becomes readily apparent almost instantly when he's got a very distinctive style when he plays. So that's my guy. Check out Vinny Appice. The two recordings in particular that really strike me are the Dio album Holy Diver. Listen to that title track, Holy Diver. It's a slow tune, man, with just this heavy groove, man, all the way through, right in the pocket. Check out also the first song on that album called Stand Up and Shout. It's a fast up-tempo tune. Plays great sound and groove on that. Really good, tasteful fills all throughout. And then the second album I want to recommend is called The Last in Line. That's the album that came after Holy Diver. A couple of standout tracks on that are the title track, Last in Line, and then there's a track called We Rock, where he does like a little bit of a military marching snare thing on part of it. So that's my guy, Vinny Appice.
Good stuff. Man, I have, in my less closed-minded later life, and in my shocking revelation that Phil Smith was a metalhead, I revisited a few guys recently, and there are some of these dudes with like just fantastic technique and a great understanding of history of drumming and all that ended up in the hard rock circles. Pace is a great example.
Yes,
the guy's hands are second to none.
Yeah, you said, man, Vinny Appice has got a lot of musical depth in his playing.
Yeah,
he sure does.
Yeah, there was definitely, he wasn't someone that was just like locked into one style of music, and
right.
You can tell there's a lot more than that. As is Pace is a great example. Bonham, of course.
Yeah.
But there's some others too that are. Sometimes we wrote it off as guys with not a lot of feel. They're wrapped up on their chops, their sound I don't like, and all that.
Just their look.
you
Yeah.
know. But then there's always those Alex and Tommy Lee and some of these guys that are like extra, just really great drummers.
Rondinelli, man, Bobby Rondinelli.
Yeah, exactly. So they're out there, and I've kind of been giving a little more attention to them in recent years.
Yeah.
Anyway, my guy is not a hard rock guy, but he is delicious nonetheless.
Who you got?
My guy is Charlie Drayton.
Woo!
Fantastic New York drummer who...
I thought he was a bass player.
Of course you did. No, some people do. You're well aware of his
I
ability
know.
on drums.
Yeah.
He's a great musician who happens to play drums part of the time. His real... You know, when he was young, he was kind of a chops guy and ran in some fusion circles and all that in New York, and they were talking about the young pup that was bringing it, but you know, I kind of came more in touch with him through that Keith Richards stuff.
Yes.
Where he and Steve would switch off.
Expensive winos.
Yeah, and you kind of hear his playing in that a lot like Steve. Sometimes you're like, who is it? You know, all that.
He played on Love Shack, man.
How about that?
Yeah.
And there's some other stuff too. Like a really great example of his playing is that Across the Universe.
Yes.
Soundtrack. He kills on a bunch of that. Kind of a modern take on Ringo. And they do some different arrangements where he's gotten real creative on that.
I've got him on a Hiram Bullock album.
Oh,
where he sounds really good.
He's a good player, man. Kind of like a combination of all those New York guys you like Steve and Parker and Gadd, and he's got some of that, but he's got a little edge to his playing sometimes too that brings out his own thing.
I think one of the things that we as drummers identify him along with Steve Jordan is that snare drum sound.
Yep.
There are times that he'll use this specific snare drum that I think the one that Jordan uses a lot of times, especially in those early recordings that we think of him with, that is that like a Ludwig downbeat snare drum. I think we think of him a lot with that high pitched Ludwig downbeat drum.
I also think of him as another traditional grip guy.
Yeah.
Which is, I always think is cool, but I'm too ingrained in my match script to revisit that.
It's a good call, man.
Thanks, man. I like that guy a lot.
Yeah, I do too. What's he doing these days?
That's a good question. You know, when I first met him, he was playing with the B-52s.
Yeah.
We did a show together.
Sterling Campbell had that gig when we did
As a
something.
matter of fact, that he might be doing it again.
Charlie Drayton or Sterling Campbell?
Sterling.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
A guy I know is teching for the recent dates. I think it's Sterling.
Yeah.
But Charlie, I met him on that, and man, he killed it. And there's another guy with a lot of depth in his playing, because he did go through his whole chops phase and all that, but kind of found his place. He's kind of like a Josh Freese in a way. Like Josh was a total chops monster kid, and now he's kind of,
it's a good point,
considered more of a hard, modern rock session guy. Charlie's kind of the same way in that he sort of got all that out of his system and
recommendations segment. You want to go first, or you want me to go first? What you got?
I cannot, and I'm just talking from experience, I can't recommend buying an iPad and embracing all that is filing charts, PDFs, all that, scanning things in and doing it. It has made my life so much easier on so many levels.
John, you make your life even easier? Learn a notation program and throw away the scanner.
No. But the next thing you'll ask me to do is like learn to record with a microphone so I don't have to drive an hour and a half and bitch about it. I'm old school, man. Look, I mean, whatever. However your approach is,
John Analog Chalden.
You're not you're not bringing, I don't have to bring a music stand, which is bigger than an iPad. I don't have to worry about flipping pages and them tearing up and being marked up, and it's all right there. Multiple artists I played with. I have files upon files of charts in their own folders. I can create set lists where I'm not undoing the 3-ring binder and removing these charts in order. If there's a change, I just move back. There's a list of songs. I hit it. It opens up. If it's 2 pages, I swipe. I can't recommend enough as an analog, stuck in the mud old bastard. At least buy an iPad and start managing your music and your notes and all that. It has made preparing for repeat gigs about as easy as it comes. It's made my stress level go way down. And I'm just like, even if it's just like, I might not even look at it all the time, but it's there. I'm comfortable. It's awesome, man. Do it.
John, that might be the most passionate and fired up I've ever seen you, and it's even gotten to the point to where I think I might do the same thing now. That's pretty impressive, dude.
Every once in a while, I'll get excited about something. It won't last probably, but enjoy it and embrace it.
I'm seriously thinking about doing that now.
It's incredible, man.
It's good stuff. It sounds like the shackles of paper have been released from you.
I absolutely despise the shackles of paper I dealt with forever.
Yeah, sure. I'm still shackled, man, but I'm starting to get fired up.
It blows my mind. If ever there was the definition of the dark age, it's me, and I'm telling you to embrace technology. Come on, man.
Well, I'm going to do some technology, and the technology is actually right in front of your face.
Helping this to be available to you, good listeners.
Yes. The piece of gear I want to talk about is useful in so many different ways, aside from making John go to sleep. The piece of gear that I'm going to talk about, you're actually you're soaking in it right now. You're listening right now. Yeah. Since we've been recording this show, I purchased a little piece of gear that is an audio interface. It is made by the Behringer Company, and it is called the Euphoria 404 HD, and it costs a whopping $100. This is the little piece of gear, the little audio interface and set of mic pre's that has recorded every single show that you have ever heard. It has gone on the road with us. We've taken it it's been on tour buses, green rooms, been in factories. It has been everywhere you can think of, and it has never let us down. And for $100, I don't know if you're going to find anything that is quite this good. And I just want to describe it to everybody really quickly. Again, it's a Behringer piece of gear, but it has Midas preamps for the mic pre's. They're really super hot, good sounding, warm preamps, and they have enough power in them to power this microphone that I'm speaking in right now without any kind of a cloud lifter. And that microphone is a Shure SM7B. That microphone traditionally needs some type of an extra preamp to go before it goes into a mic pre to give it a little bit more oomph. But this little sucker that we're recording into right now has got enough power to power it without having to have any type of extra cloud lifter on top of it. A couple of other things that are really unique about this, especially again for the price. This thing has 4 ins and 4 outs. It will take either 4 XLRs or 4 quarter-inch inputs, and it will record 4 tracks simultaneously onto 4 separate tracks. In other words, it's not like some of the other 4-track machines out there that it'll have 4 separate microphones, but it'll record all on one track. Not so with this one. This one has 4 separate tracks that it will record to. It's powered by both wall outlet that comes with an adapter, and it also will just power straight into your laptop via USB, which is what we've always done with it as well. It's got really nice headphone monitoring. John and I both wear headphones when we record the show, and it could not be easier to use. It comes with software. You load it onto your computer, you plug in your interface, and it just takes care of itself from there on out. The only other thing you have to do is inside of your digital audio workstation, choose the correct audio driver that it installed on your computer, and that's it. I mean, it is simplicity at its finest. So far, it's been bulletproof. Like I said, John and I have taken this little piece all over the place to record, and it's just been fantastic. Super easy setup. It's got MIDI ports in and out. And if you want to be the ultimate badass, you could get 2 of them, slave those things together, and record an entire drum kit with 8 dedicated microphones for $200. Not bad there, John.
I like it.
The debut of a new segment on the Drummers Weekly Groovecast.
This one actually gives you more low-end torque and more high-end horsepower. That way you can go down the track at 350 miles per hour.
Drummers Weekly Groovecast Garage.
John, you've got a brilliant suggestion today. Oh, it's a good one, man.
I'm sorry. I think part of it is in my world, in my little.
You're taking
vintage,
for granted that people know this, and they don't.
I know, but in my vintage drum world, and I've been in it forever, and I know a million people that are. I kind of have this point, like, well, duh. Of course, there's a lot of people that don't, and so in my less than enthusiastic, polar opposite response to Phil's excitement, it's only based on the fact that there's a bunch of jaded old bastards that I've been dealing with forever, present company included, meaning me and all of my personalities in my head, not Phil. I sometimes these things are like, well, duh, is what comes to the forefront of my mind. So know that I love sharing things, and anyone who already knows this, shut up.
2 things. One, I already know in spades what this tip is, and I'm still excited.
Okay.
And 2, I hope you don't bring this negative doom and gloom to your songwriting partners.
And a lot of doom and gloom songs have been huge hits, pal. People experience doom and gloom, and sometimes a song can just embrace everything they feel, and it resonates with them. So don't take that away from me.
Don't tell that to Bobby McFerrin.
Whatever.
John, what do you have for us today?
Well, shock and surprise, I'm going to talk about a little Gretsch drum idiosyncrasy.
Yeah.
I know, Gretsch. We like them. Deal with it.
Stop it.
Deal with it. We like them. I've refurbed and worked on a ton of Gretsch. And just even in just simple maintenance, this problem arises. But there are the bane of any Gretsch fan and Gretsch enthusiast and Gretsch refurbisher is the word I was looking for, are these god-awful pot metal self-tapping screws that have been used for 1,000 years on these drums. Oftentimes, if you're saying, hey, I'm going to rewrap a Gretsch kit, or one falls out or whatever, you've got problems. I know it's happened to you on a drum just from use.
Yeah.
Let alone pulling off 12 to 16 to 20 lugs on a drum.
Yeah.
40 screws, maybe,
I distinctly remember not too long ago being at a gig and on a floor tom, just in the middle of a gig, I heard a rattling coming through the ears.
What is that?
Yeah, and it was one of the screws that had just come undone just from gigs and transport, and it was just, bouncing around on the bottom drum head.
First and foremost, some of these screws are going to be shot. It's just the nature of the beast in what they're made of, the nature of self-tapping screws, all of that. So you're able to do one of two things. You eventually develop what I call the sensitive hand. You would think, tightening it. Oh, you got to be real careful not to over tighten. Blah, blah. Yeah, that's a big part of this. But sometimes just unscrewing it,
right?
Feeling the give and all that. Sometimes I can tell, that one's going to be shot. You don't want to break it off into the lug.
Not unlike a tuning hand almost when you're tuning drums.
True.
Yeah.
But, okay, two things that I've noticed with this. One, being very careful in the extraction of said screw.
Yes.
If, in fact, it comes out and it looks relatively clean, the first thing I don't do, I don't retap. I see if once the lug's off, I see if it goes back in and there's any hold. If it is, leave it in that exact hole. Because they are self-tapping screws, so they might not be exact, with all this. So if I'm going to take 16 lugs off a Gretsch floor tom, every screw's going in the exact hole. If I'm cleaning them, they're staying in that hole. If for some reason you see them stripped, okay, then you're into the retapping and using different. Like I use a hex head screw like they do, but I buy these stainless steel ones that an 832 tap will be used on this lug, and there you have the replacement. Now, if you're refurbing, it doesn't matter.
Right.
The drum's altered. So if you're taking drums off lugs off a lacquer drum, you've got to be just ridiculously careful with that. So,
John, same lugs go in the same place.
I typically
on the drum,
will do that.
And then, of course, as you take
I'm
the
not
lugs,
as hung up on that.
Yeah.
As I am.
On the lacquer, though, on the lacquer, it could even be more important, though.
It
from
could
that
be.
standpoint. Yeah. And then you make sure that it's each floor tom leg, if it's a floor tom, or each mounting bracket or each lug, every one of those, the screws go right back into said lug or said attachment.
Most definitely. And there's a wing and a prayer on a lot of that too.
Yep.
You hope they come out. There's an era where they came out pretty easy and you could reuse them. And sometimes it's drum to drum. I've had a drum where I had no problems on one in the same kit, and then 5 or 6 bolts are just shot. So this is something we bring this up for 2 reasons. One, if you're delving into Gretsch, which we've been pushing and pushing, you got to be careful. I could take apart a Ludwig kit 3 times,
right,
and it's not a problem. Gretsch, there's a problem.
Yeah.
So be hyper aware of this if you're diving in and working on anything. And it goes the mounting brackets, everything. They use these horrific things. So,
well, John, just to recap, let me throw a couple quick questions out there. This is the list at the bottom of the article of things that you might need. What size did you say those screws are?
They are 832 for lack of better. It's not, it's self-tapping again, but 832 is if you're going to buy, I have a little
hex head
T-handled,
socket.
even when I'm retapping lugs, a little T-handled tapping tool. The head changes. 70s were bigger than 80s. So that does, I'm not really that concerned with that, because you can have nut drivers that accommodate that. It's more the threads.
Yeah.
So if you're redoing, or you have ones that go south, the best ones for Gretsch are typically, especially for toms, are 832 thread and maybe 3/8 length, I think. But nonetheless, 832 is, You don't want smaller's not going to work, and larger you be careful. You might break out the wall.
Yeah.
And that's happened.
Right. Yeah. And then you
trying to go too big. 1032 might crack that nipple.
Then you just have to get new lugs then, or new brackets at that time. Yeah.
And sometimes they break off in the lug, man. You know, it's good to stockpile.
Right.
I have a number of Gretsch lugs sitting around just for that reason.
So, John, I know you were saying that you're doing it now almost exclusively by feel, right? Yeah. Did you ever use like any kind of a torque wrench or anything? Do you know any kind of like inch pounds or foot pounds that it might have?
I'm so freaked out about those screws that I can't bring myself to use a tool.
Yeah, I gotcha. Like
on a Ludwig kit, I'll use a drill and a nut driver, bit, and take them off without any problems at all. The Gretsch, though, I do it all by hand.
Yeah,
it's just something that I've just run into too many problems. So I really can't answer that question in regards to Gretsch because I've never ever used anything but my hand and a nut driver.
Gotcha.
I encourage you to do that because it is a feel thing and you can sense sometimes if things are going south.
My underrated drummer is a guy that I kind of rediscovered over the last few weeks. And this guy is a monster and the poster boy for unjust treatment. He is a British drummer, fellow named Lee Kerslake. And Lee, who to my understanding is semi-retired now, was the longtime drummer for the British band Uriah Heep. But for most of you listening to this, if you know about him at all, you probably know about him from his time with Ozzy Osbourne when Ozzy was actually also fired from Black Sabbath and then started his solo career. Lee Kerslake was the drummer for Ozzy for the first two solo albums he did, Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman. Now, a lot of people think, no, he wasn't. That was Tommy Aldridge. Wrong. Lee Kerslake was the drummer on those, and he was brilliant on both of those albums. And to give you an idea of how great he was, of course, you can listen to those tracks, but also go on YouTube and find the isolated tracks from some of those classic hard rock recordings. And man, you will hear not only was he just a great drummer from the standpoint of chops, but he's again one of these guys that played with a tremendous amount of feel. He was not one of these all hat, no cattle drummers. This guy really played well and played with great feel. Now, the tracks in particular that I want to talk about, and also part of the unjustness of some of the things I want to talk about, was he played on these great tracks like Crazy Train, I Don't Know, Mr. Crowley. From Diary of a Madman, he played on Flying High Again, great track, Can't Kill Rock and Roll. But the one track in particular, and probably the one that everybody talks about from the standpoint of it's got some chops and some guts to it, the opening track on that album is called Over the Mountain, and it starts out with one of these great hand and foot triplet things, rolling triplet kind of drum fills, and it just kind of sets the tone for the rest of the record, real aggressive type thing. Check those out. And by the way, that Over the Mountain isolated drum track is available on YouTube. Go check it out. Now, one of the other reasons that you guys might be aware of him was he was very unceremoniously fired by Sharon Osbourne before they went on tour with that Diary of a Madman album. And that is where Tommy Aldridge takes over. But just before you think, oh, well, it can't get any worse, it does get worse. It ended up in the late 80s Bob Daisley and Lee Kerslake, Bob Daisley's the bassist, ended up suing the Osborne folk for royalties, basically just not getting paid royalties. They won. So you think, oh, well, that's a great thing. Yay. Well, it was a great thing. But there was a little bit of retribution that was done that was just, it really was a crappy thing. In 2002, they decided to re-release Diary of a Madman and Blizzard of Oz, like a remastered version. Well, Sharon decided that they were going to really put the screws to both Daisley and Kerslake, and they had Puffy Borden and Robert Trujillo come in and re-record the bass and drums for those releases. And those were released in wide release for a while. And then due to pretty much public and fan outrage, they actually reinstated the original tracks when they did a box set re-release a few years ago. So I thought it was appropriate to tell that little story.
That is dirty, man.
Oh, man, those guys were playing dirty pool, weren't they? But yeah, check out
I'm
Lee
glad
Kerslake.
he didn't call me, because I would have been mad as a. I wouldn't have helped him a bit.
Yeah.
That.
I mean, that's one of the dirtiest things I've ever heard.
That is really dark, man.
It really is. And, before you start pointing fingers also at like Robert Trujillo and Mike Borden, listen to this. There was also a little bit of a weird, dirty-handed thing that went on with that as well. They went in to do this, but they were never told what it was about. And they were never told that it was going to even be released. I don't know what they thought they were doing when they went in there, but they never thought that they were going in to actually re-record that stuff to be released in place of the Kerslake and Daisley tracks.
They kept everything else except drums and bass.
You got it. They kept Randy Rhoads and, of course, the Ozzy vocal. So, anyway, go check out Lee Kerslake on Blizzard of Oz and Diary of a Madman in particular, and then go check out some of those isolated drum tracks from those two records. They are stellar.
Interesting story, nonetheless. Mine will be a little shorter and sweeter than that, but nonetheless.
No bawdy tales of being fired in this?
No, I'm sure in the circles he ran, he probably been fired unjustly on occasion. The guy I'm gonna point out was brought up to me in the form of a question a couple weeks ago. Someone sent me a video and said, "Who was this guy?" And there was some debate about it, but it was a Joe Tex video live thing, which there's quite a bit of that out there. The band is just killing. And this drummer is named Clyde Williams. And there was like, some people were like, oh, I think it's James Gadsden, or I think it's blah, blah, blah. I was like, no, Clyde Williams he actually had his own band, if I'm not mistaken, that ended up basically becoming Joe's backup band, and even recording on a lot of the early 60s stuff, the Dial records, stuff like that kind of stuff that back in the formative days of Joe's career, they were backing them up, and for quite a number of years were his touring band and all that. But Clyde Williams was this man. He's I told Phil he's like a cross between Clyde Stubblefield and James Gadsden, and he's got some New Orleans-y kind of thing in there. And I'm not sure where he's from originally. If someone knows, reach out to me and let me know. I know he did work with Alan Toussaint, and so there could be some of that, New Orleans, Texas, or Louisiana, but maybe some Texas. I don't know, but it points to that maybe being the case. He's from that southern middle United States, and he had a pretty good career though. Man, he did. The funniest one is I found out he sang on some Sun Ra records. I don't think he played, but I think he sang on some stuff.
I sincerely hope he sang on the track "Nuclear War."
We'll find. We'll try to dig in and find out. And then I know he did some of that some of you may be familiar with some of the Bill Gaither stuff, like huge gospel stuff. They were major players. The Gaither family in general, he and his wife had some records that did well. And then that Homecoming stuff, which is probably the quintessential Gaither stuff.
Yeah.
On a lot of levels. He played on a bunch of that. So he may have just been their guy for a long time. I'll have to do a little more research on that, but I know credit-wise he played on some of that.
Yeah.
And it kind of makes you think, he was probably involved in that circle for quite a while. But nonetheless, this dude is funky. It's fantastic stuff. Bunch of stuff on YouTube with him. Check him out because you'll have another hero in your old school R&B circles to draw from.
But I am absolutely delighted to once again be a part of.
This one actually gives you more low-end torque and more high-end horsepower. That way you can go down the track at 350 miles per hour.
Drummers Weekly Groovecast Garage.
Oh, I love it. If nothing else, I like it so I can be sound man for the day.
You just like that you're able to insert that in there, and I wouldn't have a clue how.
Did I tell you how I did that little Drummers Weekly Groovecast Garage? I just set it normally into a microphone, and then went and did the pitch warp thing where I knocked it down like a major
You're
sixth.
telling a bunch of these young people it's okay to alter performances.
Listen to me. I did not say that
It's fake, man.
I didn't auto-tune it. I just brought the pitch down. I shouldn't say anything.
That's not auto-tune?
No, because the pitch was perfect. I just brought it down.
All right.
John, what do you have
You
for us
should have
this
just done
week?
it in the morning.
That's true, man. Or after I smoke a pack of Pall Malls.
Exactly.
So, John, what do you
Be
have
authentic,
today?
Bill.
What do you have today?
Sorry.
And let me tell you, this is another good one. Oh, I like this one a lot.
You always set it up for disappointment. Now, look, the trend in recent years, and it's a fabulous trend, is lighter hardware. And it really, really, I could not be happier about it because of the reality is I'm aging and I need lighter hardware. So, I like this trend.
Yeah.
But, I still have in my working kit where I'm doing multiple rooms and a lot of constructed stages in said rooms.
Mm-hmm.
I still as much as I love my flat bass stuff and I love it. There's still certain settings and stages where I want a little more stability.
And let me go ahead and add to that whole thing where you talk about where you have a constructed stage. All right. A lot of times you and I both play these type of gigs where you will have choreography and dancers and stuff that happen between, and that adds to the instability of these stages. So I wanted to throw that out there for people that are listening also, that sometimes you just need that little extra spread in legs.
Yeah. So I kind of, So I kind of, I have on that particular gig, I do a lot of that. You don't know what you're going to get. I use a nice single braced traditional tripod type stands. And, I love those Yamaha ones. There's some Pearl ones I use a bunch. DW has a nice one. And everybody's got a nice single brace, but sturdy, well-made stand. My issue is, it's, they're not featherweight by any stretch, and the way they're designed and what I like with, the infinite, tilter and all that stuff. You're putting a little weight on it. But I noticed most companies make their individual piping so long. It's mind blowing. It's like you could have that stretched out at its max. You know, you might have a 12-foot stand. I mean, it's just bizarre how, and maybe not that much, but nonetheless, it's really, really.
Sure.
And I always, my stuff's so low, I don't need it. But anyway, I just came up with this thing, and a few other people have said since I brought it up, they do it. But I kind of rethink the length of that piping, the middle section, and even to the point where, like, in certain stands, you can cut down the base piping even and reattach the
like the coupling
there. So I get a pipe cutter. I do my math. Make sure I'm not making it so short that it, if I were to sell it, it's worthless. But I cut these pipes down, and man, like, say something's 2.5 feet long, which is absurd, but there's some that are really long. I might cut it down a whole foot. And when you're talking about the entirety of a hardware setup, you're talking about losing some weight there. And is it a lot? Maybe not. Is it going to be like your lightweight aluminum based flat stands? No, but you're still talking about bringing the weight down, and anything you can do to bring weight down in a working kit is good. So that's my little tip this week.
Okay, so now I get to play interviewer and ask you some questions about some things, because invariably listeners are going to want to know this. One, what kind of pipe cutter do you have, and is it readily available just at like hardware stores, plumbing supply? Yes,
and from experience, don't buy the cheaper ones. Buy, they have some that are like $8.95, and they're just buy the better. Like Rigid is a company that makes really good ones, and there's another company that's kind of black and red. Buy a better one.
Is it the one?
This is something you'll buy once if you buy a good one.
Is it the type of pipe cutter that you attach onto the pipe, and then you essentially you tighten it up and spin it around the pipe, and then after a period of time, it'll either break and fall off, or you break it off?
Yeah, usually it'll kind of fall off. And the reason I like those is it's a real clean cut.
Yeah.
And all I really have to do is after I do it, I go back and I kind of bore out the inside just to make sure the burrs of that cut are gone. And then I file back a little bit around the outside circumference just to make it where, you're not catching it on your hand or something.
Sounds like somebody I know has had some experience with sawed-off shotguns, too.
That was another lifetime ago.
So do you also do that with a hat stand as well?
If it's a really long pipe, yeah. And sometimes I've had hi-hat stands where you could only go so low because that pipe was so long,
right?
And I'd cut that, and I'd be, you got to, especially with a hi-hat stand, you got to be real careful about treating the inner pipe and all that, and making sure it's smooth because it's going down, it's going over other components. So make sure you're mindful of your due diligence with filing out and smoothing out the in and outside of that pipe, the end of that pipe. But I do it on I've done it on snare stands even, that's usually not a big problem. Snare stands are rarely needed.
Right. Do you ever chop thrones?
No, I never buy any that are choppable. So
right. You don't do the old Vinny trick from 1977.
No, I kind of feel like modern day thrones, as low as they'll go, is as low as I probably need to be sitting anyway.
It's as low as anybody needs to be sitting, unless you're 4'10".
Right. So
which is also my favorite shotgun.
That doesn't, and I buy good thrones, so altering them is not an option. You don't want to potentially screw up. I use hydraulic ones. It's like I don't have any business getting in the middle of those.
Yeah, John, that was excellent, man.
Cool, man. It's just like I said, it's not going to just change your hardware bag to 50%, but it makes a difference.
Well, if you have 3 cymbal stands, hat stand, let's say those 4 things you chop, you would probably end up at least saving, wouldn't you say, 5 to 7 pounds?
I don't know. It depends. Sometimes it depends on the components remaining. Because sometimes the tilter or the where like a straightaway hideaway boom thing is that some of those can be real big and bulky and all that. So, I'd hate to say and I think it depends on the type of stand and what you're doing. Like a simple straight stand, might not notice as much versus, and sometimes it has to do with the quality of and the thickness of the piping too.
Virtually every one of our stands that's made now, aside from the flat base aluminum stuff, it's just steel, right?
Right. Yeah.
Just chrome plated steel.
There was a run of, I think Gibraltar did, where they did all aluminum, and it was kind of like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
But that didn't last very long, and I'm not sure why. Maybe it ends up getting dented up too easy.
I was going to say, it's got to be easily dentable.
Yeah, so you're throwing stuff in a bag, steel. I mean, I abuse my hardware when I'm packing up. I don't treat it gently. I mean, I'm not like laying it in there gently. I'm not throwing it from 10 feet either. But if it's aluminum, you could end up having problems. Yeah. If it bends, it's not usable.
I'm going to say that this segment is going to end up being one of the most adored segments by our listeners. I already love it.
Just be careful not to cut it too short.
The segment or the stand?
Yes.
All right, folks, that's going to do it. Thank you so much for your listenership and your support through 2017. John and I appreciate it so much. It's absolutely worthwhile for us to continue doing this just from the love and support that we get from our listeners out there in Groovecast Nation. Thank you once again. Also, start looking every first and third Thursday. We've got brand new stuff for 2018. Accountability Thursday will be published starting on Thursday, January the 4th. This is the little mini episode, the little bi-weekly show where every 2 weeks we're going to spend a little bit of time in the shed together. We're going to play some rudimental solos either out of the Will Coxon book or the NARD drum solos book. So you can go back and listen to our official announcement, which is on our regular outlets of finding the show, which would be iTunes, Google Play Podcasts, Stitcher, Podbean, SoundCloud, anywhere you listen to your favorite podcast. You can search for Drummers Weekly Groovecast and find us there. So you can find that announcement for Accountability Thursday there. So get your drumsticks out, your snare drum, your practice pad. We're going to get ready to do some practicing in the new year. And with that in mind, we will be back with brand new content starting on Monday, January the 8th, and we will move forward from there, onward and upward with more great topics and interviews and some new segments and good stuff throughout the rest of the year. All right, as always, stay in touch with us. You can communicate with us through our email address, which is drummersweeklygroovecast@gmail.com. You can also interact with us in social media. Our Facebook account is facebook.com/Drummers Weekly Groovecast. And if you're a Twitter fiend and you got those 280 characters, reach out to us. We're at DW Groovecast. Or if you're OG, twitter.com/DW Groovecast. On behalf of John Chalden, this is Phil Smith. We will see you every Monday and then some Thursdays moving forward. Until then, we'll see you later.